As you have seen probably several times, when you run a simulation model in the report, you see two types of utilization. You see instantaneous utilization and scheduled utilization. So what is the difference between these two? So let's go through instantaneous utilization and see what it is. So instantaneous utilization basically talks about utilization of a resource throughout the whole simulation time, no matter if the resource has been scheduled to work or not, no matter if the resource is available to work or not. All these parts is considered in the utilization. Assume that a specific resource has been scheduled to be available with capacity of 1, 2/3 of the time, and it's not available to work 1/3 of the time. Let's assume we are looking at the situation of a worker in a manufacturing facility for 8 hours of a day. So in these 8 hours, this resource has been scheduled to work 2/3 of the time with capacity of 1, and then other 1/3 of the time, this resource is not available to work, so the capacity is 0. And also, let's assume that during the time that the resource is available to work, and also assume during the time that the resource is available to work, it's only working half the time. So basically, during this time, the utilization of the resource is 50%. So it's working just half the time. And so the question is that, okay, what is the instantaneous utilization? As I said, the instantaneous utilization looks at the utilization of the system during the whole simulation time, no matter if the resource has been really scheduled to work or the resource has not even been scheduled to work. So that's why we call it instantaneous. It means it looks at each instant of time for which we run the simulation. So that means, so here the instantaneous utilization basically is 50% or 0.5, 2/3 of the time that the resource is available, and then for the other 1/3 of the time that the resource is not available, the utilization is 0, right? So in the other 1/3 of the person, the resource is not available even to work, the capacity is 0, and the utilization is 0 as well. So the result here is 0.33. So instantaneous utilization of this resource will be 0.33. Now here, if I want to calculate a scheduled utilization, I'm going to only look at the time that this resource has been scheduled to work. This is the time in which this resource has been scheduled to work. So I'm going to only look at that time. And in this time, the resource is busy 50%, half the time. So the utilization of the resource in that time is 50%. So if I want to record the scheduled utilization, I would just say 0.5, because the utilization of the resource during the time it has been scheduled to work is 0.5. So that's the meaning of a scheduled utilization. Let's look at a specific scenario. So let's assume your resource has been scheduled to work in the first 5 hours. We are looking at a 10-hour day. So let's assume your resource has been scheduled to work in the first 5 hours. This is the time in which the resource is available. And in the next 5 hours, the resource has not been scheduled to work. So the resource is not available in this time. And let's assume the policy that we are going to implement when we want to go from available resource to unavailable resources is ignore. Also, let's assume that this resource is working with 100% utilization during this time. Okay, so there is 100% utilization during the time that the resource is available. Now the time kicks in for the resource to be unavailable. However, the resource has not finished the work yet, so we are going to continue the work, and then we go maybe up to hour 6, and then the work is done, and then after that the resource is going to be unavailable. Okay, so let's see how we can calculate instantaneous utilization in this scenario. So simulation is going to look at the whole simulation time from time 0 to time 10. And what we see here is that out of these 10 units of time, for 6 hours, the resource has been utilized 100%, and for about 4 hours, the resource utilization is 0. So the utilization of 100% or 1 multiplied by 0.6, which is 60% of the time for which we have run the simulation, and then for the other 40% of the time that we have run the simulation, the utilization is 0. So the utilization of this resource will be 0.6 at the end of the day if we report instantaneous utilization. But let's see how we can calculate the scheduled utilization. For the scheduled utilization, remember we said we are just going to look at the time for which this resource has been scheduled to work. And in this scheduled time, obviously the utilization of the resource is 100%. That's for sure. However, what we see is that the resource has continued working for another 1 hour. So it's not that the utilization is 100% for 5 hours. The utilization is 100% for 6 hours, although the resource was scheduled to work only 5 hours. So in this scenario, that 100% utilization or utilization of 1 is going to be multiplied by 6 out of 5. So the resource was scheduled to work only 5 hours. But instead of working, for example, 3 out of these 5 hours or 4 out of these 5 hours, what we see here is that the resource is actually work for 6 out of these 5 hours. And so the scheduled utilization of the resource is going to be 1.2 here. So these are the scenarios in which we may see a number greater than 1 for the scheduled utilization. So if that happens, I want you guys to know how this number was calculated. It's better for the projects, for the homework and project and exam, when I ask you guys to report the utilization, it's better to report the scheduled utilization. And since those numbers make sense, you report the utilization in the time in which the resource has been scheduled to work. And if you see the numbers that are greater than 1, just make sure you know what has happened, and when you report your numbers, just bring the justification that why this number is greater than 1.